comes a time in your life when you have to choose between keeping company and keeping your peace. And I'll tell you something, not everybody who walks with you is meant to walk into your destiny. Some people were only assigned to your life for a season. And the danger is when you try to make a season last forever. When God sends a storm to clear the air, don't rebuild what He tore down. Some of you are exhausted not because of the battles you're fighting, but because of the burdens you're still carrying, burdens in the form of people who were never meant to walk this far with you. You're wondering why your joy is low, why your mind feels cloudy, why you can't sleep in peace, even though you're doing all the right things. And I'll tell you, it's not always the environment or the job or the circumstances. Sometimes it's the company you keep. You've been trying to fix what God told you to release. You've been trying to explain yourself to someone who was never listening in the first place. You're wasting energy trying to convince a heart that's already made up its mind to misunderstand you. Let me ask you this, how many times will you keep choosing pain just to avoid the silence of separation? How many times will you bend your spirit to keep someone comfortable in your presence who's never been concerned about your peace? That's not love. That's fear disguised as loyalty. You've mistaken connection for calling. But every connection is not a covenant. Some people are close to you just to study your strength and weaken it from within. And the enemy knows he doesn't need to destroy you, he just needs to distract you. And what better distraction than a negative presence wearing the mask of a friend? There are people who walk into your life not to build you, but to drain you. They don't celebrate your growth, they criticize your process. They don't inspire your purpose, they interrupt it. Every time you take a step forward, they're the voice reminding you of your past. Every time you try to rise, they pull on the old version of you because that's the only version they can control. And as long as you stay around them, you'll keep shrinking to fit the spaces God has already called you to leave. There's something sacred about your peace. It's not just silence, it's strength. It's where your prayers come from. It's where your clarity is restored. It's where you hear the voice of God. And yet we keep trading that peace for conversations that go nowhere, arguments that produce no fruit, and relationships that cost us our identity. My friend, peace is not a luxury, it's a necessity. It's not selfish to protect it, it's wise. Sometimes God will allow the discomfort to grow just so you'll move, just so you'll let go, because He knows if it stays comfortable, you'll settle. You'll get used to dysfunction. You'll call it normal. And you'll miss the breakthrough that's waiting on the other side of your obedience. Now, I know letting go isn't easy, especially when your heart is involved, especially when you've invested time, energy, and history into someone. But let me remind you, your future is more valuable than your history. Don't hold on to what's killing you just because it once made you feel alive. That season had a purpose, yes. But don't turn a chapter into the whole book. If the fruit is rotten, stop watering the tree. You're not called to keep what God is trying to cut. You're not required to maintain what heaven is trying to move. Sometimes you've got to trust that walking away is not quitting, it's healing. It's not hate, it's maturity. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. And when you let go, you make space for God to step in. You open the door for the right people, the right peace, the right purpose to enter. There's a freedom waiting for you, a lightness in your spirit. But you'll never feel it if you keep carrying the weight of someone who was never meant to be your responsibility. You've been loyal, yes, you've tried, you've forgiven. You've given second chances, third chances, and silent prayers in the night. But now it's time. Time to reclaim your peace. Time to take your hands off what's no longer yours to hold. You don't need a long explanation to know something is off. You don't need a list of reasons or even a clear conversation, because deep down, something inside you already knows. The heart may be tender, the mind may wrestle, but your spirit, your God-given discernment never lies. And when someone's energy starts to shift, when their presence begins to feel heavy instead of holy, your spirit will pick it up long before your mind understands it. That's not paranoia, that's protection. That's God whispering, pay attention. You see, energy doesn't lie. You can fake words, you can fake smiles, you can even fake loyalty, but you can't fake presence. And you know it. You've been around someone and walked away feeling drained, confused, even discouraged. You didn't argue. You didn't disagree. But their spirit carried something that weighed yours down. That's not coincidence. That's a spiritual alert. God gave you that internal alarm for a reason, so stop silencing it just to keep the peace. Sometimes the most dangerous person in your life isn't the one who yells at you, it's the one who silently poisons your atmosphere. They never clap when you win. They don't speak life into your dreams. They don't celebrate your growth. They just linger. And every time you get excited about something, they give you that look, that sigh, that little seed of doubt. They don't destroy you with words, they just erode your confidence with silence and side comments. And yet you stay. You stay because it's familiar. You stay because you don't want to be alone. But what's the cost? Let me tell you something, being alone in peace is better than being surrounded in chaos. You don't need to explain what your spirit already feels, the unease, the emotional fatigue, the subtle anxiety that follows their presence that's not random. That's not your imagination. That's your spirit trying to survive in a toxic atmosphere. When God is in something, it brings clarity, it brings joy, it brings light. When something is of the enemy, it brings confusion. It clouds your thinking. It makes you question yourself. And one of the most overlooked signs of a negative person is how you feel after you leave them. Not during, not when you're smiling through the surface, but after. When you get home and you sit in silence, what do you feel? Lighter or heavier? Uplifted or uncertain? That's the real test. We were never meant to live under the weight of another person's darkness. You are not a dumping ground for their frustrations. You are not a canvas for their bitterness. You are not called to be a sponge for someone else's anger, fear, or pride. And the enemy will often wrap that kind of person in charm and false connection just long enough to enter your life and start sowing seeds of insecurity. That's why it's not just about who they are, it's about who you become around them. You used to be confident, now you hesitate. You used to pray boldly, now you second guess your worth. You used to walk in purpose, now you tiptoe in fear. That's not love, that's not friendship. That's emotional warfare, and it's happening in silence. But here's the good news, God didn't create you to live bound. He didn't anoint you to walk in confusion. He didn't call you to carry someone else's chaos as if it were your assignment. You are allowed to step away. You are allowed to protect your spirit. You are allowed to say, this doesn't feel right anymore, and walk in the direction of peace. And don't be surprised if you lose some people when you start choosing peace. Don't be shocked when the phone stops ringing, when the invitations stop coming, when certain people begin to distance themselves. That's just confirmation that their presence was never meant to stay. You're not losing, they're leaving because they can't breathe in the atmosphere God is building around you. The light in you irritates the darkness in them, and that's okay. Let them go. You can't heal in the same atmosphere that broke you. You can't grow in the soil of jealousy, bitterness, and manipulation. You need fresh air. You need truth. You need room to rise. And it starts with honoring what your spirit already knows. Listen, trust it. Move in the direction of light, even if you have to walk alone for a little while. There's a fine line between loyalty and bondage, and too many people are living in chains, calling it commitment. You're staying loyal to someone who stopped showing up for you a long time ago. You're holding on to promises that were broken, to patterns that never changed, and to a version of love that hurts more than it heals. But love was never meant to feel like a prison. Loyalty was never meant to rob you of your freedom. If you have to shrink to stay, that's not loyalty, that's survival. And God didn't create you to survive in relationships. He created you to thrive. He designed you to grow, to evolve, to walk in truth and purpose and peace. But when you stay tied to people who refuse to grow with you, you start to dim your light just to match their comfort. You stop dreaming out loud because they mock your vision. You stop stepping forward because they're threatened by your momentum. And in the name of loyalty, you build a cage for your own soul. Now listen, there's nothing wrong with being faithful. There's nothing wrong with standing by someone in their weakness, being patient through hard seasons, walking with people through valleys. That's love, that's grace. But there's a difference between being patient with someone's process and being a prisoner of their dysfunction. Some people don't want to grow. They don't want help. They don't want truth. They want control. And as long as you keep giving it to them, they'll keep taking it until there's nothing left of you but the shell of who you used to be. You've been convinced that walking away makes you selfish, unloving, unfaithful. But let me tell you something, God does not bless loyalty to dysfunction. God doesn't reward you for being bound. He honors you for being free. Because it's in freedom that you can finally hear His voice again. It's in freedom that you rediscover your worth. It's in freedom that you step into the calling He placed on your life. Don't confuse being needed with being loved. Some people need you not because they love you, but because you're useful. You carry their weight. You absorb their pain. You fix what they keep breaking. And they build a pattern out of your kindness. But love that only survives on your sacrifice isn't love, it's dependence. And God never told you to play Savior. That position is already filled. If you have to lose yourself to keep someone else, it's not worth keeping. Because the more you disappear in their shadow, the more you forget the light that God placed inside of you. You were never meant to be silent just to keep the peace. You were never meant to settle just to be accepted. You were never meant to bear a cross someone refuses to carry for themselves. You're carrying their anger, their bitterness, their immaturity, and you're calling it commitment. It's time to check your heart and ask, am I here out of love or out of fear? Am I staying because it's right, or because I'm afraid of what life looks like without them? Because fear will chain you to what God is trying to release you from. Fear will dress itself as loyalty, and before you know it, you're standing still while your spirit is crying out to move forward. You can't elevate while dragging weight. You can't rise while babysitting bondage. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is say, I've done my part. I've prayed. I've waited. I've forgiven. But now I choose peace. And it won't always make sense to the world. It won't always be understood by those around you. But when heaven sees your courage to walk in truth, heaven responds. God honors obedience. He blesses decisions made in faith, even when they're hard. He honors hearts that choose healing, even when it means letting go. And sometimes the miracle is not in what He gives, but in what He removes. Because once you release what's been draining you, you make space for what He's been trying to send. You can't pour living water into a vessel full of poison. You can't walk in purpose with your feet tangled in someone else's chaos. So no, loyalty should never feel like a prison. Love should never chain you to pain. And you, child of God, were never meant to live like this, guarding someone else's demons while yours go unattended. You were made for more, made for freedom, made for joy, made for peace. Let me tell you something that will set you free today. Peace is not a luxury. Peace is not some reward you earn after you've sacrificed enough, after you've cried enough, after you've proven yourself enough. Peace is your birthright as a child of God. And when someone disrupts that peace consistently, persistently, deliberately, you have every right to step back and guard what God has given you. Because when your peace is gone, everything else starts to unravel with it. Your focus, your joy, your energy, your connection with God, they all begin to suffer under the weight of someone else's chaos. And it's subtle at first. You don't even realize it's happening. You brush off the tension. You explain away the disrespect. You excuse the drama. But the fruit doesn't lie. You start feeling heavy, anxious, short-tempered, uncertain. You lose your rhythm with God because you're too busy managing someone else's instability. And you know it. You know something isn't right, but you hold on, thinking it'll pass, thinking you can fix it, thinking maybe if you just love them harder, give them more time, sacrifice a little more, they'll change. But peace doesn't grow in pressure. It grows in truth. And when someone shows you repeatedly that they don't value your peace, believe them. Don't keep offering access to someone who keeps disturbing the atmosphere of your soul. That's not compassion, that's compromise. And God never asked you to compromise your peace to prove your love. Some of you are tired, not because life is overwhelming, but because you're spiritually misaligned. You've made room in your life for someone who keeps bringing confusion and conflict, and now your spirit is suffocating. God is not the author of confusion. He doesn't operate in manipulation. He doesn't move through guilt. He leads with clarity. He corrects with love. He calls with conviction. If the presence of someone consistently leaves you drained, scattered, second-guessing your worth, it's time to pause and ask, what am I allowing that God never sent? Peace is a gift, but it's also a choice. And you have to stop giving your peace away to people who aren't willing to protect it with you. That means setting boundaries. That means learning to say no without guilt. That means stepping back without explaining yourself to people who only want access, not accountability. Because peace isn't just the absence of conflict, it's the presence of God. And you can't afford to trade His presence for someone else's comfort. Now I know it's hard to let go, especially when history is involved, when you've prayed for them, when you've cried with them, when you've walked through dark valleys together. But there comes a time when protecting your peace means choosing God over history. It means choosing truth over familiarity. And when you do, you will feel the difference. You'll sleep better. You'll breathe easier. You'll hear God clearer. Because some relationships are so loud in your life, they drown out the very voice of heaven. Don't confuse comfort with calling. Just because you've known someone for years doesn't mean they're assigned to your next season. Just because you've survived storms together doesn't mean you're meant to build futures together. Some people were meant to teach you, not walk with you. And the moment you stop holding on out of fear, you'll start living with freedom. God is a God of peace. Jesus didn't die just to give you heaven someday. He came to give you life now. Abundant life. Life filled with righteousness, joy, and peace in the Holy Spirit. But if your circle is full of confusion, bitterness, jealousy, or emotional manipulation, don't be surprised when that peace begins to fade. You were never meant to sustain what God never assigned. And it's not your job to carry relationships that are breaking your back just to keep them from falling apart. Peace doesn't beg, peace doesn't chase, peace doesn't compete, peace stands, peace trusts, peace waits on the Lord. And the moment you begin to choose peace over pleasing people, you'll see God move in ways you never imagined. You'll gain clarity. You'll grow deeper in faith. You'll rise in strength because peace makes space for purpose. So today I'm asking you to choose peace, not because it's easy, but because it's right, because your soul matters. Your mind matters, your calling matters. You cannot keep sacrificing your sanity to make others feel secure. That is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to walk in the truth, to live in the light, and to guard your peace like the treasure that it is. Some of you are in bondage today, not because of what others have done to you, but because of what you keep allowing in your heart. You've forgiven with your lips, but not with your spirit. You've said you've let go, but the resentment still whispers in your quiet moments. You're still carrying conversations in your head that happened years ago, rehearsing betrayals, remembering every wound, every word, every silence. And the truth is, the pain didn't just come from the person, it came from the root you allowed to grow when you refused to release them. You see, forgiveness isn't approval of what they did. It's not saying they were right or that it didn't hurt. Forgiveness is saying, I choose to stop letting this hold me hostage. Because bitterness doesn't destroy them, it destroys you. It eats away at your joy. It clouds your judgment. It poisons your peace. It builds walls around your heart, not to keep healing, but to keep healing from getting in. And I know it's hard. I know it's hard to forgive people who never said they were sorry. It's hard to release people who caused damage and walked away as if nothing happened. But you don't forgive because they deserve it. You forgive because you do. You deserve to be free. You deserve to walk without the weight of what they did. You deserve to feel the sunlight on your face again, without their shadow always creeping behind you. God calls us to forgive not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Necessary for healing, necessary for growth, necessary for peace. When Jesus said to forgive 70 times 7, he wasn't talking about arithmetic. He was talking about the posture of your heart. That every time bitterness tries to sneak back in, you choose love. Every time the memory starts to replay, you choose peace. Every time the enemy tempts you with anger, you choose to be free. Because unforgiveness will convince you that you're in control, when in reality you're in a prison where the key is in your hand, but your pride won't let you use it. A prison where your mind replays the same hurt like a broken record. But God didn't call you to live trapped in yesterday. He called you to live free today. And part of that freedom means understanding that closure isn't always a conversation, it's a decision. You might never hear "I'm sorry," you might never get an explanation, but closure doesn't come from them. It comes from Him. When you lay that person, that pain, that betrayal at the feet of Jesus, He exchanges your burden for His peace. That's the power of grace. That's the power of surrender. Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. Forgiveness doesn't mean access. It doesn't mean you invite them back into your life to do the same thing all over again. No, it means you release them to God. You stop trying to carry what was never yours to fix. You stop waiting for justice in your timing, and you trust that God sees, God knows, and God repays. Some of the greatest healing you'll ever experience will come when you forgive someone who never even asked for it. When you stop trying to prove how wrong they were, and you start walking in how right God is, that's when your heart begins to heal. That's when your spirit begins to soar. That's when you finally make room for joy, for clarity, for love, not the love that comes from broken people, but the love that comes from a whole God. You cannot carry both grace and grudge. One will always outweigh the other. And if you don't lay down the grudge, you will miss the grace. You will miss the moment. You will miss the healing God is trying to pour out over your life. Some of you have been crying out to God, "Heal me, Lord, restore me. Give me peace." But He's saying, forgive them. Let it go. Make space for the miracle. You cannot pour new wine into old wineskins. You cannot receive new life while clinging to old pain. And you cannot move forward until you stop reaching back. Yes, they hurt you. Yes, it was real. But your healing is real too. Your peace is possible. Your future is still waiting. And it's not on the other side of revenge. It's on the other side of release. So forgive, not because they earned it, but because God has forgiven you. Not because it's easy, but because it's holy. Not because you feel like it, but because you believe that freedom is better than bitterness. There comes a time in life when you must understand that not every person who walks with you is meant to stay with you. Some people are only there for a chapter, not the whole book. And if you're not careful, you'll keep rereading that same chapter over and over again, trying to rewrite it, trying to force it to make sense, trying to hold on to someone that God is already asking you to release. And the longer you stay where God has already moved on from, the more you delay your healing, your growth, and your destiny. You see, letting go isn't always about weakness. Sometimes it's the strongest thing you'll ever do. It takes strength to walk away from what's familiar. It takes strength to stop trying to fix someone who doesn't want to change. It takes strength to accept that the story doesn't have to end the way you hoped it would. Because the truth is, you can love someone deeply and still know they're not good for your soul. You can care with all your heart and still understand that staying in that relationship is costing you more than it's giving you. And too many people confuse loyalty with bondage. They stay connected out of guilt, out of obligation, out of fear of being alone. But what they don't realize is that staying connected to someone who pulls you away from your purpose is far lonelier than standing alone with God by your side. Don't let someone else's chaos become your calling. Don't let someone else's instability steal your identity. When you constantly have to shrink to keep the peace, when you have to silence your values just to stay accepted, when you have to compromise your joy to avoid conflict that is not love, that is bondage dressed up as connection. And God didn't create you to live bound. He didn't create you to walk through life dragging someone behind you who refuses to grow, refuses to heal, refuses to change. Some people are not interested in transformation. They are committed to staying the same. And when someone has shown you that again and again, don't argue with it. Don't try to spiritualize it. Don't keep going to God asking Him to change them when He's trying to change you. Sometimes the real test isn't whether you can hold on, it's whether you can let go. Letting go doesn't mean you failed. It means you finally saw clearly. It means you finally stopped pretending. It means you finally stopped settling for less than what God wants for you. And when you let go, you make room. You make room for new strength, new vision, new relationships that don't drain you but build you. You open your hands so that God can place something better in them, something whole, something true, something worthy of the heart you've been trying to give to the wrong people. And I understand it hurts. It hurts to let go of someone you prayed for, someone you invested in, someone you dreamed with. But healing often begins in the heartbreak. That place where you surrender not because you're weak, but because you trust that God sees what you cannot. You trust that what's ahead is greater than what you're grieving. You trust that obedience will always lead to blessing, even if the blessing doesn't show up right away. And let me tell you, when you let go of the wrong person, peace will come in like a river. Not all at once, but slowly and surely, you'll begin to feel your spirit lift again. You'll wake up with clarity. You'll walk without the weight. You'll pray without distraction. You'll breathe without tension. Because some people bring a storm into your life that only leaves when they do. You were not created to carry the burden of someone else's choices. You are not responsible for fixing people who don't want to be healed. You can pray for them, love them from a distance, hope the best for them, but you cannot lose yourself trying to save them. That's not your job. That's God's. And sometimes God can do more with your absence than He could ever do with your presence. But He can only move when you stop interfering. He can only step in when you step back. So today I want to speak to the part of you that's afraid to release, the part that wonders what will happen if you finally let go. Let me tell you what will happen. Your soul will breathe. Your spirit will rise. Your future will begin. And God will do what only He can do: restore, redeem, and rewrite your story in a way that glorifies Him and frees you. Let them go. You don't need to hold on to what God is already removing from your life.